Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're beginning a new chapter. It's chapter 10, Canto 11, chapter 10. Here's the chapter summary. First the BBT, then Bhaktisiddhanta's chapter summary. You'll notice a lot of similarity between the two. In this chapter, Lord Sri Krishna refutes the philosophy of the followers of Jaimini. What did Jaimini teach? Karma Mimamsa. And describes to Uddhava the spirit soul bound within the material body, how that spirit soul can develop pure transcendental knowledge. Paragraph. The Vaishnava, or one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, should observe the rules and regulations found in the Pancharatra and other revealed scriptures. According to his own natural qualities and work, he should follow the code of Varnashram in a spirit free from motivation. The so-called knowledge received through one's material senses, mind, and intelligence is as useless as the dreams experienced by a sleeping person attached to sense gratification. Therefore, one should give up work performed for sense gratification and accept work as a matter of duty. When one has come to understand something of the truth of the self, he should give up material work performed out of duty and simply engage himself in the service of the bona fide spiritual master, who is the manifest representative of the personality of Godhead. The servant of the spiritual master should have very firm affection for his guru, should be anxious to receive from him knowledge of the absolute truth, and should be devoid of envy and the tendency to talk nonsense. The soul is distinct from the gross and subtle material bodies. The spirit soul, who has entered into the material body, accepts bodily functions according to the reactions of his own past activities. Therefore, only the bona fide transcendental spiritual master is capable of demonstrating pure knowledge of the self. Paragraph. The followers of Jaimini and other atheistic philosophers accept regulated material work as the purpose of life. But Krishna refutes this by explaining that the embodied soul, who has come into contact with segmented material time, takes upon himself a perpetual chain of births and deaths, and is therefore forced to suffer the consequent happiness and distress. In this way, there's no possibility that one who is attached to the fruits of his material work can achieve any substantial goal of life. The pleasures of heaven and other destinations which are achieved by sacrificial rituals can be experienced only for a short time. After one's enjoyment is finished, one must return to this mortal sphere to partake of lamentation and suffering. On the path of materialism, there is certainly no uninterrupted or natural happiness. That's chapter summary. Again, Bhaktisiddhanta is quite similar. In this chapter, Lord Sri Krishna refutes the doctrine of philosophers like Jaimini and describes to Uddhava how the conditioned souls can develop pure transcendental knowledge. Paragraph. One who is fully surrendered unto the Supreme Lord should follow the Vaishnava Dharma that is described in the Pancharatra and other revealed scriptures. According to his natural qualities and work, one should follow the rules of Varnashram without duplicity. So-called knowledge that is received through one's material senses, mind, and intelligence is as useless as the dreams experienced by a person attached to sense gratification. Therefore, one should give up work for sense gratification and accept work as a matter of duty. Paragraph. When one has come to understand something of the truth of the self, he should give up material work performed out of duty and simply dedicate himself completely to the service of the bona fide spiritual master. Sounds like almost the same. Almost verbatim, in fact. Who is the manifest representative of the personality of God? A disciple should have firm faith in his spiritual master. He should be anxious to learn from him the science of the soul, and he should be free from envy and the tendency to indulge in nonsense talk. Paragraph. The spirit soul is separate from both the gross and subtle bodies. As an embodied soul accepts different kinds of bodies according to his karma. Only a bona fide spiritual master is able to impart the knowledge of self-realization by refuting the philosophies of Jaimini and others. Lord Sri Krishna explains that the embodied soul who has come in contact with segmented material time, there it is again, segmented material time, takes upon himself a perpetual chain of births and deaths and is therefore forced to suffer the resultant happiness and distress. Thus, there is no possibility that one who is attached to the fruits of his material work can achieve any substantial goal of life. The pleasures of heaven, which are achieved by performing sacrificial rituals, can be experienced for only a short time. After one's heavenly enjoyment is finished, one must return to this mortal sphere to partake of lamentation and suffering. On the path of materialism, there is certainly no uninterrupted happiness. Almost the same. I'm listening to a series of lectures Srila Prabhupada gave on Canto 1, Chapter 5. He's in New Vrindavan. And it seems that he has with him Sridhar Swami's commentary. So in addition to reading the verse, he's reading the Sanskrit of Sridhar Swami's commentary and then explaining his commentary. And that's the way of disciplic succession. And similarly, our BBT translators are particularly taking Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary because they didn't have Prabhupada's because he had departed. So they took Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary and expanded. And in some cases, in a number of cases, it's almost cut and paste. No problem. Text 1, 11.10.1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, taking full shelter in me, with the mind carefully fixed in devotional service of the Lord as spoken by me, one should live without personal desire and practice the social and occupational system called varnashram, social and occupational. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, the Supreme Lord said, one who is surrendered unto me should tirelessly practice Vaishnav Dharma, as prescribed by me in scriptures such as the Pancharatra. He should perform his occupational duties according to the system of varnashram, which is a favorable condition for accepting spiritual life. Now, his translation alone presents his perspective of where varnashram fits in with devotional service. It's not synonymous, but it's a favorable condition for. The BBT purport reads, in the previous chapters, 7, 8, and 9, Lord Krishna described through the story of an Avadhuta Brahmin the qualities and character of a saintly person. Now the Lord describes the practical means for achieving such a saintly position. In the Pancharatra and other scriptures, the personality of Godhead gives instructions for executing devotional service. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita 4.13, Chatur Varnamaya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. I have personally created the Varnashram system. There are innumerable rules and regulations in the Varnashram system, and the devotee should execute those which do not contradict the process of devotional service. The term Varna indicates different classes of human beings, some in the mode of ignorance, some in the mode of passion, some in the mode of goodness. Devotional service to the Lord is executed on the liberated platform, and therefore some injunctions for those persons in passion and ignorance may be contradictory to the regular principles for those in the liberated platform, on the liberated platform. Therefore, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master who is not different from the Lord, one should execute the basic principles of Varnashram in a way that is favorable for advancement in Krishna consciousness. It's very clear. Very clear. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. The Supreme Lord said, one should take shelter of me and work under my direction while following the system of Varnashram. If one gives up my shelter and engages in fruitive activities due to material attachment, he will never attain his ultimate welfare. Paragraph. When one follows Varnashram Dharma and family traditions simply for amassing pious merit rather than for engagement in my service, one is certainly misdirected and will never attain eternal benefit despite executing one's duties as prescribed by me in the Vedas and rejecting all prohibited activities. If one does not take shelter of me, then his endeavor is ultimately useless. On the other hand, if one engages in my devotional service without deviation, there is no necessity for performing the religious duties prescribed in the Vedas. When my unalloyed devotees fail to observe all the rules and regulations prescribed in the Vedas, they should never be considered as misguided. That was Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. Little different audience, different time. And Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, it's short. In this chapter, the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, the living entity's bondage as a result of their contact with matter, and the refutation of philosophers like Jaimini are described. Having given Uddhava many valuable lessons by narrating the story of the Avadhuta Brahmin, the Supreme Lord now describes the process of sadhana. He says, O Uddhava, you should follow the Varnashram Dharma and the devotional practices described by me in the scriptures like Pancharatra, quote unquote. And here's Vishwanath's actual commentary. In the 10th chapter, Gyan, the bondage of the jiva because of relationship with his body, and the philosophy of Jaimini, as well as its refutation, are presented. Having presented teachings, the Lord now teaches the sadhana. Taking shelter of the Dharma explained in the Pancharatra scriptures by me, perform varnashram duties. And the last is Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha. Krama Sandarbha. The verse by verse. In Krama Sandarbha, it's different than Prabhupada's. Well, significantly different in the sense that not every verse has a purport. Of course, Prabhupada's BBT translation and commentary also doesn't for every single verse, but Krama Sandarbha, it seems to me, it's more select, even than what Prabhupada wrote. But so here's the translation and then commentary. The Supreme Lord said, taking full shelter in me through bhakti, as explained by me, while being without material desire, one should practice varnashram. Using Uddhava, the Lord gave teachings. Here, he clearly teaches others. That's it for this morning. So that's the new journey that we're on. Knowledge, and then the means to achieve that knowledge, or the means to achieve the level of detachment of the Avadhuta Brahman. We can remember it's, the Avadhuta Brahman is in a certain standard of bhakti or spiritual life, and he's speaking to a king who he's not an Avadhuta, he's not a Brahmin, he's a king, and he has many, many duties. So then how to get to the stage of detachment that the Avadhuta has, while one follows the varnashram system as given by Krishna. We heard this nice explanation. It's nice, it's worth repeating it. The Vedas in their entirety give means for elevation of persons within different modes. We discussed this a little bit last night. The Vedas has a desire tree, and there are things for persons in passion, ignorance, and for goodness. And it's not that everything that's in the Vedas, particularly those things that are prescribed for those in ignorance and passion, that we're to observe. So what to observe, what not to observe, the spiritual master guides. And the standards for that guidance are in Hari Bhakti Vilas. So we follow that system, and then progressively, by adherence to and faithfulness to the spiritual master, and the process of achieving that detachment that was described previously, by progressively becoming attached, particularly we heard those things that will help one to become attached to the personality of Godhead, they're to be accepted, because that's the goal, attachment to the personality of Godhead. It's Daivi Varnashram, not simply Varnashram. Okay, I'm going to show something on the screen, hopefully. There we go. There's the 4 Varnas in that nice BBT painting. Kshatriyas on the upper right, Brahmanas on the upper left, Vaishyas on the lower right, Shudras on the lower left. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, taking full shelter in me, with the mind carefully fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, as spoken by me, one should live without personal desire and practice the social and occupational system called varnashram, which also he gave. And one more nice illustration and verse. Therefore, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, who is none different from the Lord, one should execute the basic principles of varnashram in a way favorable for advancement in Krishna consciousness. Now it seems that for most devotees anyways, the whole devotional service is pretty straightforward, and then when you start bringing in the varnashram topic, it starts to get blurry and not so clear, less clear at least. On the one hand, Prabhupada didn't train us initially in so much in the varnashram system, although obviously that was there. The ashram part was there, the brahmacharis, grihastas, and sannyasis. And to some extent, the varnas were there with persons that were particularly gifted as teachers in the study and teaching and deity worship. Patan, yajan, yajan, dan, patigraha, those duties of a brahmana and qualities of a brahmana. But it wasn't so emphasized and so rigid. And then as time went on, more emphasis, but not a real clear picture, as we all know, of like what is it and how to make it happen. It's one of the reasons that it hasn't happened. It's not a real clear picture, at least for most. Some think they have it, and you get different pictures of those who think they have it. Very different pictures. So we're going to hear in this chapter at least the emphasis that's being given by Krishna to Uddhava on this topic. So let's see if there's some discussion.
Good Maharaj, I have like 2 or 3 questions. Could you speak a little bit about karma mimamsa that is propounded by Jamini? I'm not familiar with that philosophy that's being refuted here.
In real simple terms, the path of elevation is theistic conduct, work done as prescribed by the Vedas. The Vedas are given to teach us how to do our work properly. We do our work properly according to the codes of the Vedas, and that's the message of the Vedas. That's the attainment of the Vedas. Now, that it is explicit is de-emphasis on worship of those who dispense karma, whether it's the Devas or the Supreme Lord, because according to this atheistic philosophy, the topmost truth are these codes of work or karma principles, and any deva or dispenser is subordinate. So you don't need to worship the devas or Vishnu. You just do good work and they'll dispense. De-emphasis on the yaja and emphasis upon the performance of good work. It's an atheistic doctrine. drawn from the Vedas. It's an interpretation or picture.
About emancipation or the liberation from the material bondage at all, or is it just work?
Well, I don't have an answer for that. It's not that I don't think they teach that by good work you'll get liberation. By good work you'll get good results. Happiness, to achieve happiness, we want good results from our work. So do good work according to the standard that the Vedas give of what good work is. And that's the message of the Vedas. So it doesn't appear that salvation is a carrot or, a promise or something. It's elevation and enjoyment, happiness.
The second question was about I just wanted to know what differentiates Daivi Varnashram from Varnashram.
Oh, very simple. Unto whom are the activities and the fruits of those activities to be dedicated? In one case, there's no unto whom. It's just perform duties. And the other is unto whom is everything.
So I guess here Krishna is talking about Daivi Varnashram.
Yes, of course.
He says.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the other is a malinterpretation.
Maharaj,
as is Jaimini's teaching. Performance of duty. Varnashram that's not Daivi Varnashram is not so different from Karma Mimamsa.
Maharaj, last thing was could you speak a little bit about Sridhar Swami? We keep hearing a lot of references. Is he in our disciplic line?
No.
Could you speak a little bit about?
I'm trying to remember which disciplic succession, but it's not the our disciplic succession. Obviously, his life was before Lord Chaitanya, and he had taken sannyas, as Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas, in the line of Shankaracharya. And he knew that Shankaracharya had reverence for the Bhagavatam. It indicated specifically in an Ashtaka that gives names and pastimes of Krishna that are found only in the Bhagavatam. So it was known by Adi Shankara's followers that he had some appreciation and affinity for Srimad Bhagavatam. So with that in mind, that historically, as far as I've understood it, not only didn't Adi Shankara make commentary on the Bhagavatam, but someone evident amongst his followers did, but the commentary was lost. So in between those events and Lord Chaitanya's appearance, he decided to write commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam that would have some elements that would be appealing to the Advaitavad people, but largely, almost entirely, a personal commentary. And so when Jiva Goswami makes reference to Sridhar Swami, he says in Tattva Sandarbha, I'll make reference only to those sections of Sridhar Swami's writings that are in line with Vaishnava teachings. he didn't say the rest of it. He just said that. And so he's not in our disciplic succession that I can recall. I'll check, but I don't think so. Yeah.
Maharaj, I needed some clarification regarding segmented material time. It was repeated several times, and I wanted to make sure.
Why was I making emphasis? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just an interesting way of saying it. Time is actually eternal. And that which appears to be time, or the transformation of eternal time, is time as we know it. Segmented means past, present, and future, as opposed to eternal. Segmented material time, past, present, and future type. So the illusory energy is moved by that, not by eternal time. Just a very interesting way of saying it. It sounds like a Bhaktisiddhanta type of very precise delineation of something. Segmented. Because time is not segmented. It's eternal. There's not pieces stitched together in segments that make up what time is. It's just eternal time. There's no beginning, middle, and end. But the expansion of eternal time by Lakshmi Devi, who entrusts the time energy to the glance of Mahavishnu, it's that abhas, or shadow, or segmented material time. It's the past, present, and future time. And then it's very expandable, longer and shorter and in between durations for the situations of life in higher planets, middle planets, lower planets. The segments expand and contract.
I had one more question, and this is something that I don't want to speculate too much upon, so I thought I will ask. Now, the other day when we were discussing about Ramayana, it was said that King Bharat ruled for 10 million years, and Ram got married at an early age, irrespective of how long he lived, irrespective of the time that was available. But what did they do, Maharaj?
What did who do?
Lord Ram or whoever who lived for that long duration of time. They got married at a very early age, and then there were pastimes.
Well, that's found. What did Ram do? We have some idea, because there's Ramayana that tells us. He performed Ashwamedha Yagyas, and he protected people, and he made himself available to hear from his citizens, and he was ruling. That's what he did. He's doing what rulers do. He ruled. He heard problems, solved problems. An example was when into the court came someone complaining about Lavanasura, and so what to do about Lavanasura, and he dealt with it. No, what the topic came up specifically about Bharat because it was a question that came from China, and I didn't have the answer. How do we understand? It's because it just came out of the blue. Yes, there are living entities that live for a long time. That was the topic. How long? How do we understand how long did he live? Your question is different. What did he do while he was alive? He ruled. He did what kings do. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but I have, that almost universally, Prabhupada would speak about Bharat Maharaj, that he renounced his kingdom at the age of 20. No, there must be, this is intuitive. There's some reference which speaks something like that, and Prabhupada took that something like that reference and just regularly repeated it. So how to understand the difference between 10 million years and 20 years? One of the traditional ways of options is different yuga cycles, or perhaps even longer, different days of Brahma. That's one. That's the most likely option. But without knowing what was the reference that Prabhupada was drawing from, because he did just pull a number out of the air, it's hard to say something further. But that's not your question. Your question is, what did they do for all that period of time? Vyasadeva lived for a long period of time, but he does what Vyasadeva does. In trance, in samadhi, and the compiling of the Vedas was only a small part of what he did. I mean, time-wise. Gave instructions to Madhvacharya.
Please accept my humble obeisance.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, there was a class when we were having some discussions. I heard this from one of a devotee who asked this question, so I wanted to ask you and hear it from you. Whenever we read, we always hear this sentence that always work for the sense gratification of Krishna, or not for your sense gratification. I would like to hear, what does it mean by sense gratification for Krishna?
Well, that's Prabhupada's phrase, sense gratification. It's not so common to say the sense gratification of Krishna, but for the pleasure of Krishna. That's more common, a way of saying it. And what the meaning is, okay, this is Sankhya. There's senses and there's sense objects, and what is the proper consciousness behind senses contacting sense objects? There's these two contrasting positions. The purpose or the consciousness behind material consciousness is, there's an object out there, let me see how my senses can be the enjoyer of that object that's out there. And if it's not pleasing to me, let me get rid of it or change it or something. But the whole program is the enjoyment of my senses, that's the consciousness. And the option is what you're asking. There's an object, here's the senses. Now, what can be done in relation to the object that the senses of Krishna would be pleased? I'll give a little example that was an interesting, aha moment for me. Many years ago, I was with one other brahmachari, and we went when we were doing book distribution in the airports, and the Puerto Rico airport became legal for book distribution. So we were requested to go there. We went there. And we found by, staying there, that certain days of the week it was more busy. Certain days of the week, it was more slow. So we decided, let's use those days that are more slow for something that's a little more productive and creative. So we decided to go to some of the islands that are tourist islands in the Caribbean and distribute books there. You know, in the downtown commercial area, in the shopping area, and stuff like that. So that's what we did. So the planes that took us to those islands were pontoon planes. So zoom, zoom, and off we go. We're flying over islands, looking out the window. There's an island that's a military base because somebody is in the consciousness of, protecting, et cetera. So that became a military base. Then another one, there's a banana plantation island because here's a way to make money through providing something people like and need. Banana or plantation. And over there is a tourist spot. So different people, it's the same thing. It's an island or an island or an island. But according to consciousness, you see it differently. And then you develop differently. So the consciousness of Krishna consciousness is the objects out there are meant for Krishna's pleasure. And that's the meaning. For the satisfaction of Krishna. So, and then there's different ways of satisfying Krishna. And we have our different natures, so we're inclined to satisfy Krishna more this way or that way or some other way. So that diversity is fine. It's perfectly natural. But the principle is the principle of consciousness behind the activity.
Thank you. It's all based on how you feel when you look at the...
It's consciousness. I mean, because consciousness is who we are. The soul is conscious and consciousness. And then there's feelings, but that's the mind. That's not who we are.
Okay.
So, more precise. I mean, feelings you can say, not wrong, but more precise or more accurate is to say consciousness. So, however your consciousness is oriented or aligned, that's going to determine material or spiritual consciousness. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
This is from Snehali Devidasi. She's saying, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, I think I heard Sridhar Swami was from Nimbaraka Acharya Sampradaya. He was a worshipper of Lord Narasimhadeva.
Yes, that's correct.
So
Thank you for that.
And
Nimbarka Sampradaya. And because there was some discussion about his worshipable deity. I mean, he knew so much about Krishna. Why was his worshipable deity Nrsingadev? That kind of question comes up. He had affinity for Nrsingadev. It's not like he didn't have affinity for Krishna, but he had particular knowing of Krishna, just as some ISKCON devotees have affinity for this deity, that deity, or another deity, knowing that Krishna is the source of everyone. Go ahead, Nimbarka.
This question is from Radha Vallabh Das. It says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. In the class today, we had disciples need to have firm affection for spiritual master. The question is, does firm affection manifest by special mercy of the Lordship in addition to active hearing?
Well, it's not independent of special mercy, but it's not independent of endeavor either. No, in other words, attachment is natural for the soul. It's again this, the consciousness and mind distinction. The mind is going to be attached to something, and what the mind is attached to, it's depending upon where your consciousness is directed. So it can be material or spiritual consciousness. So it's affection follows consciousness. And if you direct your consciousness to, something other than the spiritual master, you're going to have affection for that something other than the spiritual master. You can't have anything, affection or no affection. You can't have knowledge or forgetfulness without supersoul. So in one sense, it's mercy, but it's not only mercy. We're making choices, conscious choices. Next, that's it.
That's it. Oh, there's one more that came, Maharaj. So this is from Akshay Hutulkar. He's saying, since everything comes from Krishna, how can we understand about sin? How does that come from Krishna?
Everything comes from Krishna. Can something exist that doesn't come from Krishna? Well, take the mode of ignorance. Does the mode of ignorance come from Krishna? Krishna is all good. How could ignorance come from Krishna? You can't have anything so Krishna's sanction is there for there to be sin. And, it's born of ignorance. But it's to reciprocate with the desire of the living entity to be separate from Krishna, which can't happen. And so one has to be covered by ignorance in order for even to think that there's separate existence. And then when the ignorance is covering, then there's sin. And it's all of the nature of the illusory potency, which is also from Krishna. And Krishna couldn't withdraw it. Okay, well, if Krishna can withdraw it, why doesn't he withdraw it? Because we wanted it, and we still want it. We're holding on to it. It's, the free will and the Lord's sanction of our free will is the topic. Okay, thank you very much. Prabhupada Ki Jai.